I just need a minute, please. I remember begging her, my mascara streaking down my cheeks. My hands were still shaking from throwing dirt onto my father's casket 4 hours earlier. A minute doesn't sign clients, Thea. Grief doesn't pay the bills. Vivienne didn't even look up from her monitor. Get back to your desk or find another job. I'm not running a charity here. I stood in her office doorway, the ache in my chest so physical I could barely breathe. The funeral program was still folded in my purse. Dad's favorite photo of us fishing at the lake when I was 9 stared out from the cover, his laugh lines crinkling around his eyes the way they never would again. I haven't slept in 3 days, I whispered. Vivienne finally looked up, her perfectly lined eyes narrowing. Neither have I. Finishing the presentation you were supposed to complete before your situation. The Arcadian group meeting is tomorrow. $2 million on the line. But please, tell me more about your problems. I wiped my tears and nodded. Of course. That's when I made the decision. I'm Thea Winters, 32, and until 6 months ago, I was the senior account specialist at one of the top marketing firms in Chicago. I'd spent 8 years there, working 60-hour weeks, canceling vacation plans, missing my niece's birthday parties. I'd been the one who landed the Arcadian account in the first place. But none of that mattered to Vivienne. Before I go any further with this story, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I'm still trying to wrap my head around how far this has traveled. And honestly, knowing there are people listening helps me feel less alone with what happened. I'd always been the reliable one, the fixer. Dad used to call me his little problem solver from the time I was 6 and figured out how to repair his broken fishing reel all by myself. Growing up in a small apartment with just him after Mom left, I learned early how to be resourceful, how to make things work when they seemed broken beyond repair. Maybe that's why I stayed at that company so long, trying to fix a toxic environment that was never going to change. Or maybe I was just scared of starting over. My father had been sick for months. Pancreatic cancer. The doctor had given him 6 months, but he barely made it to 3. I'd been juggling hospital visits and work deadlines, sleeping on uncomfortable chairs in his hospital room with my laptop balanced on my knees. Vivienne knew all this. She just didn't care. We all have personal problems, she'd say whenever I asked for flexibility. She'd smile that cold smile that never reached her eyes. I didn't get where I am by putting family before business. Where she was, by the way, was in an office 3 times the size of anyone else's, wearing designer clothes she'd sometimes forget to remove the tags from so she could return them later. She'd been at the firm for 15 years and had gone through 7 assistants in the past 2 years alone. But she brought in clients, big ones, and in our industry, that was all that mattered to the partners. The day after the funeral, Vivienne kept me until midnight. 16 straight hours. I hadn't showered, hadn't eaten. My phone was filled with concerned texts from relatives still in town for the funeral, wondering where I'd disappeared to. The presentation needs to be perfect, she kept saying, sending me back draft after draft with vague criticisms. This feels flat. This lacks impact. This doesn't reflect our brand ethos. At 11:45 p.m., she finally stood up, stretching like a satisfied cat. Well, I think we've got it. You can go now. I stared at her, my eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears. The meeting's at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You want me here at 7 sharp. We need to do a full run-through. She was already packing up her designer bag, not looking at me. Oh, and wear something more professional tomorrow. That outfit looks like you bought it at a discount store. I was wearing the black dress I'd worn to my father's funeral. After she left, I sat in my darkened cubicle for a long time. The cleaning staff moved around me, vacuuming and emptying trash cans. Ramon, the night janitor, placed a cup of vending machine hot chocolate on my desk without saying anything. He'd lost his wife the year before. He understood. That's when I remembered the password. 3 weeks earlier, before Dad's condition had worsened, I'd been the one to set up the secure data room for the Arcadian contract. I'd created the master access credentials that controlled who could view which documents. Standard procedure was to share the administrator password with at least 2 team members. I never did. It had been a crazy day. Dad had been admitted to the hospital again, and I'd set up the data room between frantic calls with doctors. I kept meaning to email the password to Vivienne and Dominic, the account director. But then Dad took a turn for the worse, and it slipped my mind. No one had asked about it because they all had their individual access logins. Only the administrator password could change permissions or add and remove documents. Only I had that power. I took a sip of the hot chocolate Ramon had left. It was lukewarm now, but still sweet. And as I drank it, a plan began to form. The Arcadian Group was our biggest potential client of the year. Their CEO, Marissa Arcadian, was known for her strong stance on work-life balance and company culture. She'd built her tech company on the principle that treated employees meant better business. They'd been featured in business magazines for their progressive policies. Policies that were the complete opposite of how Vivienne operated. What if Marissa knew what kind of company she was really considering hiring? What if she saw behind the polished presentation to the broken people creating it? I opened my laptop again, navigating to the secure data room. I logged in with the administrator password, and then I began to work. I didn't alter any of the official documents. I'm not stupid. But I did create a new folder, labeled Company Culture Overview, Confidential. Inside, I uploaded a document. It contained everything. Screenshots of emails where Vivienne demanded employees cancel medical appointments. The time she made Owen work through his sister's wedding because family events happen all the time, billion-dollar clients don't. The staff turnover rates that were hidden from clients. The discriminatory comments she'd made about Alara's hijab. And my own story, including a photo of the funeral program and time-stamped emails showing Vivienne's demands that I return to work immediately. I set the permissions so this folder would become visible to the Arcadian team at exactly 9:15 a.m. 15 minutes into our presentation, when Vivienne would be hitting her stride, talking about how our company values reflect your values. Then I went home and slept for the first time in days. I arrived at 7 a.m. sharp the next morning, as instructed. Vivienne was already there, pacing, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floors. Finally, she said, though I wasn't late, we need to rearrange the presentation order. I'll open, then you'll cover slides 4 through 35, then Dominic will close. That wasn't the plan. I was supposed to sit quietly and advance slides while she took credit for my work. You want me to present? I asked, confused. Unless you'd prefer I fire you today instead of next week, she snapped. My blood went cold. What? Vivienne sighed dramatically. Don't act surprised. Your performance has been slipping for months. All these personal issues affecting your work. I've been documenting everything. After this client is secured, we'll be restructuring the team. She smiled thinly. Nothing personal, just business. She was going to fire me. After everything I'd given to this company. After working through my father's illness and death. After last night. I understand, I said quietly. Good. Now get ready. The Arcadian team will be impressed by our unified front. She turned away, dismissing me. I went to my desk and sat down heavily. My plan suddenly seemed childish, petty. This wouldn't just expose Vivienne, it would blow up the whole company. Dozens of people would be affected. People like Ramon and Alara and Owen, who needed their jobs. My finger hovered over my keyboard. I could still log in and remove that folder before anyone saw it. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. Thea, this is Marissa Arcadian. Got your number from your email signature. I'm running late this morning. Can we push the meeting back to 9:30? Also, I reviewed the materials in the data room last night. Very comprehensive. Looking forward to discussing all aspects of your company culture. She'd already seen it. Everything. My hands started shaking. What had I done? At 9:30, Marissa Arcadian walked into our conference room with 2 members of her team. She was shorter than I expected, with silver-streaked hair cut in a sharp bob and keen eyes that missed nothing. Vivienne was all smiles and firm handshakes. Marissa, wonderful to finally meet in person. We're so excited to share our vision for your brand expansion. Marissa smiled politely. Before we begin, I want to clarify something. My assistant accessed your data room last night to prepare for today, and she found some. concerning documents about your internal practices. The room went silent. Vivienne's smile froze on her face. I don't know what you mean, she said carefully. Marissa pulled out her tablet and turned it around. On the screen was the document I'd created, open to a screenshot of Vivienne's email to me the day my father died. Need you back at the office ASAP. Your replacement would be here in a heartbeat if you can't handle both. Perhaps you can explain this approach to employee bereavement? Marissa asked, her voice gentle but her eyes hard. And that's when everything exploded. Vivienne's face went from pale to red in seconds. This is fabricated. A disgruntled employee, clearly. She whipped around to stare at me, realization dawning. You did this. I didn't deny it. I couldn't speak at all. The room was spinning slightly. Regardless of who compiled this information, is it accurate? Marissa asked. Of course not, Vivienne snapped. Thea has been emotionally unstable since her father became ill. She's been making mistakes, missing deadlines. I have copies of the original emails, I finally said, my voice barely audible. And the company's HR records will show the staff turnover rates. Ramon from the cleaning staff can verify I was here until midnight last night, hours after my father's funeral. Dominic, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Vivienne, perhaps we should discuss this privately before. There's nothing to discuss. Vivienne cut him off. This is a transparent attempt by a failing employee to sabotage a major client relationship before she's terminated. Marissa closed her tablet case with a decisive click. I think we've seen enough. Our company values transparent, ethical leadership and humane treatment of employees. Based on what I've reviewed, your firm's actual practices directly contradict the values you're selling to us. She stood up. We'll be taking our business elsewhere. Vivienne looked like she might actually lunge across the table. You can't make a decision based on unverified allegations from one employee. I've already spoken with 3 former employees this morning to verify these accounts, Marissa replied calmly, including your former assistant who quit last month. She turned to me. Thea, I appreciate your honesty. It couldn't have been easy to compile this information while dealing with your loss. She handed me her business card. When you're ready, I'd like to discuss potential opportunities at our company. We value problem solvers with integrity. And then she walked out, taking $2 million with her. The silence that followed was deafening. Vivienne turned to me, her face contorted with rage. You're done. Security will escort you out. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I should have been terrified. But suddenly, all I felt was relief. And something else. Something that felt strangely like power. That's fine, I said, standing up. My legs were steady now. But before I go, you should know that I'm the only one with the administrator password to the Arcadian data room. The one containing all our proprietary strategy documents and competitive analysis that you spent 3 months creating. Her eyes widened slightly. You'll need that to try to salvage this relationship. Or, at the very least, to ensure our work doesn't leak to competitors. I picked up my bag. So, you have a choice. You can escort me out right now, or you can acknowledge in writing that I'm leaving of my own accord, with a proper severance package and a neutral reference. For the first time since I'd known her, Vivienne Mercer was speechless. Dominic coughed nervously, looking between us. Perhaps we can discuss this reasonably, he said. Thea has been an exemplary employee until recent circumstances. Vivienne's face had gone from red to a bloodless white. You're blackmailing me. I'm negotiating, I corrected her. Something I learned watching you do it for 8 years. Her eyes darted to the conference room door where Marissa Arcadian had just exited. $2 million. Gone. And with it, likely the promotion Vivienne had been chasing for the past year. The partners wouldn't take this lightly. Give me the password, and I'll consider your terms, she finally said. I shook my head. Not how this works. I need the severance agreement in writing first. 3 months' salary, health benefits continued through the end of the year, and a letter confirming I resigned voluntarily for personal reasons. That's extortion. That's standard severance for an 8-year employee who's never received a negative performance review. I tilted my head. Unless you've been falsifying those too? Vivienne's jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear her teeth grinding. Fine, she spat. Dominic, draft the agreement, now. While Dominic worked on the document, Vivienne and I sat in silence. I could feel her staring at me, probably imagining all the ways she'd like to destroy me. I kept my eyes on the window, watching clouds drift across the Chicago skyline. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I never thought you had it in you, she finally said, her voice low. Always so, accommodating. So desperate to please. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The perfect makeup that couldn't quite hide the lines of exhaustion. The designer clothes that were her armor. The tension that never left her shoulders. That's what makes me good at my job, I said simply. I see what people need before they know they need it. And what do I need, Thea? She asked mockingly. Therapy, I replied, and maybe some actual friends. Before she could respond, Dominic returned with the paperwork. I read through it carefully, making a few corrections before signing. As I scrawled my name, I felt 8 years of my life ending. 8 years of missed birthdays and canceled dates and just one more revision before you go nights. 8 years of trying to earn the approval of someone who was incapable of giving it. The password, Vivienne demanded as soon as I set down the pen. I wrote it on a post-it note and slid it across the table. Apology accepted 2023. Her eyes narrowed. Is this some kind of joke? The system requires a capital letter, lowercase letters, and a number, I said innocently. It met all the criteria. I stood up, gathering my few personal items. Good luck with the partners, Vivienne. I'm sure you'll find a way to spin this. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. They'll never believe you over me, I'll make sure of it. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I don't care what they believe anymore. And I realized, with a strange sense of wonder, that it was true. I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in years, despite everything. Dad would have been proud. He always told me, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, Thea Bear. It's necessary. For the next week, I slept. I mourned. I ordered takeout and didn't answer my phone. I went through Dad's things and cried over fishing lures and old photographs. I did all the grieving I hadn't been allowed to do. On day 8, I finally listened to my voicemails. 3 were from former coworkers, expressing shock over what had happened. Apparently, Vivienne had told everyone I'd had a mental breakdown and had to be let go. But the company grapevine was buzzing with rumors about the lost Arcadian account. The 4th message was from Marissa Arcadian herself. Thea, I hope you're taking care of yourself. When you're ready, I'd like to discuss a position that's opened up at our company. No rush. Grief takes the time it takes. Call me when you can. I didn't call her right away. Instead, I went to my father's favorite fishing spot on Lake Michigan. I sat on the pier where he'd taught me to bait a hook, where he'd shown me how patience and persistence could bring rewards. I scattered some of his ashes there, watching them disappear into the water he'd loved. I don't know what to do next, Dad, I whispered. A warm breeze brushed my face, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. Yes, you do, Thea Bear. You always do. 2 weeks after walking out of my old job, I met Marissa for coffee. She didn't ask about what had happened at my former company. Instead, she asked about my father, about what I loved in marketing, about where I saw myself in 5 years if there were no obstacles in my way. We need someone to head up our community engagement initiatives, she said after listening thoughtfully. Someone who understands people, who can build authentic relationships with our users. The salary is competitive, and we have a strict policy about work-life balance. Why me? I asked. You barely know me. Marissa smiled. I know you stood up for what's right, even when it cost you. I know you're skilled enough that your former boss was willing to present your work as her own. And I know you're grieving a tremendous loss but still found the strength to set boundaries. She sipped her latte. That's exactly the kind of integrity and resilience we need. I started my new job a month later. The difference was, well, it was everything. 9 to 5 hours that actually ended at 5. Coworkers who asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. Projects that mattered. A boss who sent me home when I looked tired. I was healing, slowly but surely. And then, 3 months after I left, I got a text from Alara, my former coworker. Thought you'd want to know. Vivienne's gone. Not just demoted. Gone. I called her immediately. What happened? Remember that password you gave her? For the Arcadian data room? Turns out she used the same password for everything afterward, including her work email. Alara's voice was vibrating with barely suppressed glee. She never bothered to change it because, she's Vivienne. And? I prompted, my heart suddenly racing. And last week, someone from IT was doing routine security checks. They logged into her email using that password. Found everything, Thea. Years of manipulated timesheets. Expense reports with personal purchases coded as business expenses. Emails where she took credit for other people's work. Alara paused for dramatic effect. And get this, she'd been secretly negotiating with our biggest competitor, planning to jump ship and take her clients with her. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Are you serious? Deadly. The partners called an emergency meeting yesterday. She was escorted out by security. No severance, no letter of recommendation, nothing. I sat down heavily on my couch. I never expected. What? Justice? Alara laughed. Neither did we. But your little password was the key that unlocked it all. Apology accepted indeed. The universe has a sense of humor. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. I hadn't intended for this to happen. I'd simply wanted to escape with my dignity intact. But the password I'd chosen in a moment of bitter irony had become the instrument of Vivienne's downfall. The perfect revenge isn't something you plot and execute. It's setting in motion a chain of events that allows someone to destroy themselves with their own worst qualities. Vivienne's arrogance, her belief that rules didn't apply to her, her contempt for basic security protocols, these were what ultimately exposed her. I didn't feel the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure. The chapter was truly finished now. 6 months after starting at Arcadian, I was thriving. My team had launched a community mentorship program that was getting national attention. I'd made actual friends at work, people I had dinner with, people who checked on me when I had a bad day. And then came the industry awards ceremony. I hadn't planned to attend, but Marissa insisted our whole team go to support our nomination for the mentorship program. It's important to celebrate wins together, she'd said. The banquet hall was filled with marketing professionals from across the region. I was laughing at something my colleague Zane had said when I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I turned and saw her. Vivienne. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something more subdued. The perfect makeup was less severe. But the eyes were the same sharp, calculating, missing nothing. She was standing with a group from a small local agency. From what Alara had told me, she'd struggled to find work after being fired. Her reputation had followed her. The only place that would hire her was a startup with no industry connections, a company too new to have heard the stories. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, deliberately, I raised my champagne glass in her direction, a silent acknowledgement. She stared at me for a long beat before giving a slight nod in return. I turned back to my colleagues, to my new life, leaving Vivienne in my past where she belonged. Later that night, our mentorship program won its category. As I stood on stage with my team, looking out at a room full of industry peers applauding our work done with integrity, with purpose, with humanity, I thought of my dad. See that, Thea Bear? I could almost hear him say, that's what happens when you know your own worth. The truth is, revenge wasn't what healed me. It wasn't what rebuilt my career or restored my confidence. Those came from recognizing my own value, from finding a place where I could contribute without sacrificing my humanity, from honoring my grief instead of burying it under spreadsheets and client presentations. The greatest revenge wasn't exposing Vivienne or causing her downfall. It was living well thriving, actually after she tried to break me. 3 years have passed since that funeral day when I stood in Vivienne's office, mascara streaking down my face, begging for basic human compassion. 3 years since I discovered just how strong I really am. I still visit Dad's fishing spot on his birthday. I still miss him every day. But the sharp edges of grief have softened, and in its place has grown something unexpected: gratitude. I'm grateful for the breaking point that forced me to stand up for myself. Grateful for Marissa seeing potential in me when I could barely see it myself. Grateful even for Vivienne, whose cruelty ultimately freed me from a life of silent compliance. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the catalysts for the best ones. Sometimes we need to be shattered before we can rebuild ourselves, stronger and truer than before. If you're watching this and you're in a place where someone is diminishing you, where your worth is questioned daily, where your humanity is secondary to your productivity, please know that there is life on the other side. There are workplaces where you're valued. There are people who will see your light even when others try to dim it. And if you've already walked away from something toxic, if you've already taken that terrifying leap into the unknown, I see you. I'm proud of you. Your courage matters. If this story resonated with you in any way, please hit that like button so others might find it too. Leave a comment about your own experience. I read every single one. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places, because that's what we're all doing, isn't it? Finding our way back to ourselves, one brave decision at a time. Remember, the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to break you isn't to break them in return. It's to piece yourself back together, stronger than before, and live a life so full and authentic that their absence becomes a blessing. That's not just revenge, that's redemption. That was stupid, not smart, my boss yelled across the open workspace. His voice crashed against the silence like a wrecking ball. What were you thinking with these quarterly projections? Did your brain take a vacation? 32 pairs of eyes shifted toward me. I felt my skin prickle with heat as Palmer jabbed his finger at the spreadsheets I'd spent 3 weekends perfecting. The same spreadsheets he'd demanded by Monday morning. These numbers would tank us within 6 months. Did you even look at the market trends, or did you just make them up? He tossed my report onto his desk, pages scattering. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he cut me off. Save it, Ivy. I need this completely redone by tomorrow. And this time, try using your brain. Someone snickered from the finance corner. Another colleague suddenly found their coffee fascinating. The air felt heavy with secondhand embarrassment and relief that they weren't today's target. This was the 6th public humiliation this month. In my 6 years at Greenstone Investments, I'd grown accustomed to Palmer's management style, build himself up by tearing others down. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was because I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. finalizing those projections. Maybe it was because I knew they were flawless. Or maybe it was because last week, during the quarterly review, Palmer had presented my investment strategy to the board as his own breakthrough idea. I stared at the scattered papers, my vision blurring slightly. 6 years of swallowed pride. 6 years of watching him climb on the backs of others. 6 years of... My phone buzzed in my pocket. I rarely received calls during work hours. Everyone knew Palmer's policy on personal distractions. Taking a call right now? Seriously? Palmer scoffed. Perfect. Exemplary professionalism, everyone. Take notes. More nervous laughter. I should have silenced it, apologized, scurried back to my desk. Instead, something compelled me to check the screen. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Miss Laurent? This is Troy from Oakley Financial. I'm calling to confirm the acquisition is complete. My fingers tightened around the phone. 6 months of careful planning, secret meetings, and sleepless nights crystallized into this moment. Everything went through? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Yes, ma'am. As of 9 this morning, the transfer is complete. You now control 51% of voting shares. Palmer stalked toward me, his face reddening. Hang up, now. I kept the phone to my ear. Thank you, Troy. That's excellent news. Who's calling you during business hours? Palmer demanded, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. I looked directly into his eyes for perhaps the first time in 6 years. Just someone confirming an acquisition. What acquisition? Confusion flitted across his face. I smiled. Mine. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Wow, I can't believe the response to this story so far. If you're enjoying it, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories like this one. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on what you think happens next. Now, let's continue. My name is Ivy Laurent, and until that morning, I was the invisible backbone of Greenstone Investments' success. I wasn't always invisible. When I started as a junior analyst, I'd been bright-eyed and vocal, eager to make my mark. That changed 3 months into my tenure when I watched Palmer present my analysis of an emerging market as his own discovery. I'd confronted him privately afterward. His response? Nobody listens to junior analysts, Ivy. I did you a favor. Your idea got implemented. Isn't that what matters? What followed was a pattern. My research, my strategies, my innovations all became Palmer initiatives or Palmer methods. Each time I created something valuable, it was stripped from me like a butterfly losing its wings to a collector. I adapted. I became quieter, more observant. I started keeping 2 sets of notes, one for my official work, one documenting the theft of my ideas. I changed how I dressed, opting for muted colors that blended into the background. I became furniture, present but unseen, heard but not listened to. What Palmer never realized was that becoming invisible gave me power. People spoke freely around me. I learned about board members' divorces, gambling problems, ethical shortcuts. I discovered which managers were cooking their departmental books, which executives were having affairs. Most importantly, I learned about Palmer. Palmer came from money, old money. He'd boast during client dinners. His grandfather had built a timber empire in the 1970s, which his father transformed into a diverse investment portfolio. Palmer had grown up with silver spoons, private schools, and the unshakable belief that success was his birthright. But 3 years ago, Palmer made a catastrophic investment against the advice of his team. He lost millions of the company's money and covered it up by falsifying reports. I discovered this by accident while organizing files for the annual audit. Instead of reporting him, I filed the knowledge away, another card in my growing hand. That wasn't the only skeleton in Palmer's closet. He'd pressured 2 female associates to leave the company after they rejected his advances. He'd borrowed from client accounts to cover personal expenses. And most recently, he'd been secretly negotiating to sell Greenstone to a notorious corporate raider known for stripping companies and laying off staff. None of this information would have mattered if not for a chance discovery 6 months ago. While cleaning out my grandmother's attic after her passing, I found a dusty box of financial papers. Among them was a stock certificate for Greenstone Financial, the predecessor to Greenstone Investments. My grandmother, a quiet secretary all her life, had been an early investor. Further digging revealed she'd never sold those shares when the company restructured. According to company bylaws, those original shares converted to founding shares, which carried 5 times the voting power of common stock. My grandmother owned 3% of Greenstone. Not much on paper, but equivalent to 15% in voting power. When I inherited them, a plan began to form. For 6 months, I worked 2 jobs. By day, I was Invisible Ivy, Palmer's punching bag. By night, I was a hunter, tracking down other original shareholders, many elderly and unaware of what they still owned. I offered fair prices, better than fair, and slowly acquired shares until I was just shy of controlling interest. The final piece came from a retirement home in Phoenix. An elderly man named Chester, the former accountant for Greenstone, still held 5% of original shares. When I explained my plan, he sold them to me for $1. That man's grandfather cheated me out of my pension, he'd said. Make it right. And now, standing in the office with 32 witnesses to my humiliation, I finally had the power to do just that. We need to talk, Palmer hissed, grabbing my elbow. My office. Now. I shook free of his grip. Actually, I think we should use the main conference room. What I have to say concerns everyone. This isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, I interrupted, my voice carrying across the now silent office. In fact, I've already called an emergency board meeting for 10 o'clock. That's in. I checked my watch. 27 minutes. Palmer's face contorted between rage and panic. You can't call a board meeting. You don't have the authority. As the majority shareholder, I absolutely do. I turned to address the office. Everyone, please continue your work. There will be a company-wide announcement this afternoon. As I walked toward the conference room, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Palmer grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. What did you do? He whispered, his voice trembling with fury. I looked into his eyes, no longer feeling small. I did what you taught me to do, Palmer. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. For the first time in 6 years, I watched fear replace arrogance in his eyes. And I have to admit, it felt good. The conference room filled quickly. Board members arrived with confused expressions, some still carrying coffee cups, others checking watches with irritation. Palmer stormed in last, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "What's the meaning of this emergency meeting?" asked Lorraine, the board chair, glancing between Palmer and me. Before Palmer could speak, I placed a folder on the table. "I've called this meeting to address several urgent matters concerning Greenstone's leadership and future." "And who authorized you to call a board meeting?" Lorraine asked, eyebrows raised. I slid a document across the table. "As of 9 this morning, I hold 51% of voting shares in Greenstone Investments. According to the bylaws, that gives me the authority." Silence descended as Lorraine examined the paperwork, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. Palmer paced behind his chair, hands clenching and unclenching. "This appears to be in order," Lorraine finally said, looking up with new interest. "Though I'm curious how an analyst acquired controlling interest without our knowledge." "That's impossible," Palmer interrupted. "She's lying. There's no way she could afford." "I didn't need to afford much," I said calmly. "My grandmother was an original investor in Greenstone Financial. Her shares converted to founding shares during restructuring. Each carries 5 times the voting power of common stock." Palmer's face drained of color for the second time that morning. "Miranda Laurent was your grandmother? That's not possible." "You knew my grandmother?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Palmer's eyes darted around the room. "I knew of her. From company history." The slight tremor in his voice told me there was more to that story, but now wasn't the time to pursue it. "Over the past 6 months, I've acquired additional founding shares from original investors," I continued. "Most were happy to sell once they understood my intentions." "And what exactly are your intentions?" asked Dwight, the oldest board member. I opened the folder and distributed documents to each person. "First, to bring to light several concerning practices that threaten Greenstone's stability and reputation. Second, to propose a restructuring that better serves our clients and employees." The room temperature seemed to drop as board members reviewed the materials. The documents detailed Palmer's covered-up investment disaster, his misappropriation of client funds, and evidence of his secret negotiations to sell Greenstone. "This is slander," Palmer sputtered, slamming his palm on the table. "She fabricated everything to stage some kind of coup." "The banking records and correspondence are authentic," I replied. "You'll find everything properly sourced on pages 3 through 17. "Why should we believe you?" Palmer challenged, regaining some composure. "You're nothing. A disgruntled employee with a vendetta." Dwight cleared his throat. "These transaction records appear to have come directly from our system. That would be difficult to fabricate." "And these emails?" Lorraine looked up, her expression hardened. "Palmer, is it true you've been negotiating with Teller Capital without board approval?" Palmer adjusted his tie. "I was merely exploring options, nothing formal." "According to these messages, you've already accepted a preliminary offer," Lorraine said. "That requires board approval, which you never sought." As Palmer scrambled to explain, I watched the power dynamics shift before my eyes. Each board member's face told a story. Shock, betrayal, calculation. Some were processing the betrayal, others already considering how to position themselves in this new reality. "I propose we adjourn to review these materials thoroughly," Lorraine finally announced. "We'll reconvene at 3 o'clock. Palmer, I expect you to prepare responses to these allegations." "And what about her?" Palmer jabbed a finger in my direction. "She's manipulated this situation, acquired shares under false pretenses." "I acquired shares legally from willing sellers," I corrected. "And as the majority shareholder, I move that Palmer be placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Lorraine looked troubled. "That's an extreme step without." "Page 22, I said quietly. The board members turned to the page, which contained evidence of Palmer's harassment of female employees and subsequent cover-ups. "All in favor?" Lorraine asked, her voice tight. Every hand raised except Palmer's. As the meeting dispersed, Palmer cornered me by the door, his breath hot against my ear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started." I met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I'm finishing what you started." He laughed, a brittle sound with no humor. "You're playing a game you don't understand, Ivy. There are things you don't know, things about your precious grandmother and this company." Before I could respond, Lorraine called him away. I watched him go, unsettled by his words but determined not to show it. Back at my desk, colleagues stared openly. News had already spread. The invisible woman had suddenly become the most visible person in the building. Some approached with tentative congratulations, others with transparent attempts to establish themselves as allies. Most just watched warily, unsure where to place their bets. Hannah from accounting slid onto the chair beside my desk. Unlike the others, she had been genuinely kind to me over the years. "So it's true?" she whispered. "You own the company now?" "Controlling interest," I corrected. "And it's complicated." Hannah shook her head in amazement. "All this time, how did you keep it secret?" "People don't pay attention to what they don't value," I said simply. Palmer taught me that, though not intentionally. My computer chimed with an incoming email. It was from an address I didn't recognize, with no subject line. The message contained just 3 words: "Check your drawer." Puzzled, I opened my bottom desk drawer. Tucked beneath some folders was a yellowed envelope I'd never seen before. My name was written on it in shaky handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 years ago and a small key. "Dear Ivy, if you're reading this, then the seeds I planted long ago have finally bloomed. I've watched your career from afar, unable to interfere directly for reasons that will soon become clear. Your grandmother Miranda was more than an early investor in Greenstone. She was its heart and soul, though the company history has been carefully rewritten to erase her contribution. Palmer's grandfather stole not just her investment, but her vision. I've kept evidence of this theft in a safe deposit box at First Capital Bank for decades. The enclosed key will unlock box 217. What you do with its contents is your choice, but know that the Laurent legacy deserves restoration." An old friend who hasn't forgotten. I read the letter twice, my mind racing. Before I could process its implications, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust anyone at Greenstone. Palmer isn't the only one with secrets. Meet me at Riverside Park, North Bench, 7 p.m. Come alone." The afternoon board meeting was a tense affair. Palmer arrived with his personal attorney, a sleek woman whose reputation for aggressive litigation preceded her. He'd prepared responses to each allegation, some more convincing than others. "While I may have exercised poor judgment in some instances," he conceded, "these actions were taken in Greenstone's best interests. Miss Laurent's vendetta against me has distorted the facts." "This isn't personal," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "This is about protecting the company and its clients." The meeting ended with Palmer remaining on administrative leave while an independent audit was commissioned. Not the clean victory I'd hoped for, but a start. As the room cleared, Palmer's attorney approached me. "My client is prepared to offer you a generous settlement," she said quietly. "Twice the market value for your shares, plus a substantial non-disclosure agreement." I smiled. "I'm not interested in selling. Everyone has a price, Miss Laurent." "Perhaps, but some things cost more than money." She handed me her card. "Sleep on it. Majority shareholder is a precarious position for someone with no allies." After she left, Lorraine lingered behind. "Impressive maneuvering," she said, studying me with new eyes. "But Palmer has deep connections and deeper pockets. The board respects your position but questions your experience. Don't assume this is over." "I never do," I replied. By 6:30 that evening, I was walking along the river path to Riverside Park, the safe deposit box key heavy in my pocket. I hadn't had time to visit the bank before it closed. Whatever secrets it held would have to wait until morning. The park was nearly empty as dusk settled. I spotted the north bench, isolated, partially hidden by a weeping willow. A solitary figure sat there, shoulders hunched against the evening chill. As I approached, the figure turned. My steps faltered. "Hello, Ivy," said Palmer's father, Gregory Harlow. "Thank you for coming." I almost turned and left. Gregory had retired from Greenstone 3 years before I joined, but his reputation lingered. Brilliant, ruthless, the architect of Greenstone's modern incarnation. "Why am I here?" I asked, remaining standing. "Because there's more to this story than you know." He gestured to the space beside him. "Please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I sat, maintaining distance between us. "You look like her," Gregory said softly. "Miranda. Same determination in the eyes." "You knew my grandmother?" A sad smile crossed his weathered face. "Very well once, before my father destroyed everything." He reached into his coat and withdrew an old photograph. In it, a young woman with my eyes smiled next to a handsome young man. They were standing before a storefront sign, "Laurent and Harlow Financial Partners." "Your grandmother and I founded Greenstone together," Gregory said. "She was the visionary. I was the numbers man. We were partners in every sense of the word." "What happened?" Gregory's expression darkened. "My father happened. He didn't approve of Miranda, her background, her gender, her ideas about ethical investing. When we needed additional capital, he offered to help on one condition. Miranda's name would be removed from the company. And you agreed? I couldn't hide my disgust. No, but while I was away on business, my father and Miranda had a private meeting. Afterward, she sold her shares to him for pennies and disappeared from my life. By the time I returned, it was done. Greenstone Financial became Harlow Investments. He handed me the photograph. My father told me she took a better offer elsewhere. It was decades before I learned the truth, that he had threatened to ruin not just her, but her entire family. Why are you telling me this now? Gregory leaned forward, his voice dropping. Because history is repeating itself. My son learned his tactics from his grandfather. When he discovered you were Miranda's granddaughter, he became obsessed with monitoring you, making sure you stayed in your place. My blood ran cold. How long has he known? Since your interview, your maiden name triggered his interest. He hired a private investigator to confirm his suspicions. All this time, the realization made me dizzy. He's been deliberately keeping you down? Yes. Palmer believed if you ever discovered your connection to Greenstone's founding, you might try to reclaim what was taken from your family. He was right, I said coldly. Gregory nodded. But there's something you still don't know. Something in that safe deposit box that could change everything. What? He stood, buttoning his coat. That's not my story to tell. But know this, Palmer isn't just afraid of losing control. He's afraid of what you'll discover about how his grandfather really built his fortune. As Gregory walked away, he paused. Be careful, Ivy. My son doesn't lose gracefully, and he has more allies than you realize. I sat alone as darkness fell, the photograph clutched in my hand, feeling the weight of a history I hadn't known was mine. My phone buzzed with an email notification. From Palmer, we need to talk. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Come alone or suffer the consequences. Attached was a document. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was my grandmother's original contract with Greenstone, with a clause I hadn't known existed. I stared at my phone screen, trying to process what I was seeing. The contract contained a non-compete clause unlike any I'd seen before. It didn't just prevent my grandmother from starting a competing business. It barred any Laron from holding a management position in financial services for 3 generations. The penalty? Forfeiture of all family assets to the Harlow Family Trust. The clause was outrageous, clearly unenforceable in modern courts. But in 1974, with different laws and a powerful adversary, my grandmother must have felt trapped. More disturbing was the signature. Shaky, rushed. Nothing like the careful penmanship I remembered from her birthday cards. I barely slept that night. By 7 a.m., I was standing outside First Capital Bank, waiting for it to open. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of nearby bakeries and the promise of rain. My meeting with Palmer was in an hour, but this couldn't wait. When the doors finally unlocked, I presented my ID and the key. The bank manager escorted me to a private room where the metal box sat waiting. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key. Inside were 3 items: a small leather journal, a microcassette tape, and a sealed envelope with, "To be opened only upon my death, Gregory Harlow," written on it. The journal was my grandmother's. The first entry was dated the day after she sold her shares. I made a deal with the devil today. Victor Harlow threatened to destroy not just me, but anyone connected to me. He had photos of Gregory with Eleanor, proof of the affair I'd suspected but couldn't confirm. He would use them to ruin Gregory's marriage unless I disappeared. The contract is monstrous, but I signed to protect both Gregory and my unborn child. Victor doesn't know I'm pregnant. No one does. I'll raise this child far from here, far from the Harlow influence. Someday, perhaps, the truth will emerge. My hands shook. My mother had always said her father died before she was born. Was it possible that Gregory? I flipped through more entries, reading my grandmother's account of how Victor Harlow had manipulated land deals, threatened competitors, and bribed officials to build his empire. She had documented everything, including the wetlands scandal that later became the Harlow estate. The tape was labeled simply, "Victor and Miranda, Final Meeting." I couldn't play it without a cassette player, but I suspected it contained the proof of coercion that invalidated the contract. The sealed envelope gave me pause. Why would Gregory leave something to be opened upon his death when he was still alive? Unless, I checked my watch. 7:45. No time to speculate. I gathered the items, returned the empty box, and hurried toward Greenstone. The office was quieter than usual when I arrived. Too quiet. Staff glanced at me nervously, then away. Palmer's assistant wasn't at her desk. Palmer sat behind his massive desk, looking remarkably composed for someone on administrative leave. His attorney stood beside him, along with two men I didn't recognize. Right on time, Palmer said. I appreciate punctuality in an adversary. I'm not your adversary, I replied, remaining standing. I'm just someone seeking truth. Palmer smiled thinly. Noble, please, meet Judge Wilson and Police Commissioner Brandt. Old family friends. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Palmer had connections in places that could cause me problems. Now, he continued, I believe you've had time to review the contract. Enlightening, isn't it? Even if you manage to keep your shares, any attempt to take a management position violates the Laurent Harlow agreement. Your grandmother's assets, which funded your share purchases, would revert to our family trust. That contract was signed under duress, I said. It's unenforceable. Prove it, his attorney challenged. After 50 years, with all principals either dead or unreliable? She glanced meaningfully at Judge Wilson. Palmer leaned forward. Here's my offer. Resign from Greenstone completely. Sell your shares back to the company at purchase price. Sign an NDA about everything you've learned. In exchange, we don't enforce the contract penalties or pursue charges for corporate espionage. Espionage? That's absurd. Is it? Palmer nodded to one of the men, who slid a folder across the desk. You accessed confidential files without authorization. You secretly recorded conversations. You conspired with outside parties to seize control. Each accusation was twisted from truth, but crafted to sound damning. I realized Palmer wasn't just trying to regain control, he was trying to destroy me. You have until noon, Palmer said. After that, things become unpleasant. I left without responding, my mind racing. In the elevator, I noticed a text from an unknown number. Back entrance. Black car. Now. Against my better judgment, I followed the instructions. A sleek sedan with tinted windows waited in the loading zone. The back door opened. Gregory Harlow sat inside. Get in. We don't have much time. Once inside, he asked, Did you get the items from the safe deposit box? I nodded, clutching my bag closer. And you met with Palmer? Yes. He's threatening me with everything from contract enforcement to criminal charges. He brought a judge and police commissioner to intimidate me. Gregory's face hardened. Wilson and Brandt, Victor's old guard. Did you read the journal? Parts of it. My grandmother mentioned an affair between you and someone named Eleanor, and she was pregnant when she left. Gregory closed his eyes briefly. Eleanor was my wife. The affair was a lie fabricated by my father to manipulate Miranda. But the pregnancy. He turned to face me directly. Your mother is my daughter, Ivy. I'm your grandfather. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. My mother's father died before she was born. That's what Miranda told her, to protect her from my father, from the Harlow legacy. His eyes, my eyes, brimmed with emotion. I didn't know about the pregnancy until years later when it was too late. Miranda had remarried, changed her name. Your mother was raised believing her stepfather was her biological father. Why should I believe you? DNA doesn't lie. He handed me a lab report. I had testing done when I first located you 6 years ago. I couldn't approach you directly. The contract forbade any contact. But I could watch over you from a distance, place you at Greenstone. You got me the job? The pieces were falling into place. But then Palmer discovered who I was, and made it his mission to keep you down. Yes, Palmer has always feared losing his birthright. When he realized another Harlow heir existed, Gregory shook his head. I underestimated his cruelty. What's on the tape? I asked. Proof that my father threatened and coerced Miranda. I secretly recorded their final meeting. It invalidates the contract entirely. And the sealed envelope? Gregory smiled sadly. Insurance. I've been dying of pancreatic cancer for months, Ivy. Terminal. The envelope contains my sworn testimony about everything. The coercion, the land fraud, Palmer's financial crimes. Upon my death, it becomes public record. The implications staggered me. Palmer doesn't know you're sick? No one does, except my doctors. I've been waiting for the right moment, gathering evidence against my own son to protect my granddaughter. He squeezed my hand. I've failed you in so many ways. Let me help you now. By noon, I hadn't responded to Palmer's ultimatum. Instead, I sat in the main conference room, the contents of the safe deposit box arranged before me. The board members filed in, looking confused. Palmer entered last, his confident smile faltering when he saw Gregory already seated beside me. What is this? Palmer demanded. Dad, What are you doing here? Correcting a mistake 50 years in the making, Gregory replied. Please, everyone, take a seat. As the board settled, I stood. Yesterday, I presented evidence of current mismanagement and ethical breaches. Today, I want to address Greenstone's foundation. I played the microcassette tape on a vintage player borrowed from Gregory. The scratchy recording filled the room. Victor Harlow, sign it, Miranda. Or I release these photos to Eleanor and the press. Gregory loses his marriage, his reputation, and you lose any chance of industry support. Miranda Laurent. This clause is preposterous, barring my family for generations. Victor. Insurance against retaliation. Sign or watch everything burn. Your choice. Palmer lunged for the tape player, but Gregory caught his arm. It's over, son. The truth is finally coming out. For the next hour, I presented the complete evidence. My grandmother's journal documenting the Harlow family's decades of fraud, Gregory's testimony about Palmer's ongoing financial crimes, and records of my own systematic cataloging of Palmer's abuses over 6 years. Greenstone was built on a lie, I concluded, but it doesn't have to continue that way. As controlling shareholder, I propose a full reorganization, new leadership, new ethical guidelines, and restitution to those harmed by past practices. Lorraine, visibly shaken by the revelations, asked, "What exactly are you proposing?" "A complete audit, transparency with regulators about past violations, renaming the company Laurent Harlow Investments, restoring my grandmother's legacy, and immediate removal of Palmer from all company positions and benefits." Palmer stood, his face contorted with rage. "This is slander, a conspiracy. Dad, how could you betray your own son?" "I'm choosing truth over lies," Gregory said quietly. "Something I should have done decades ago." The vote was unanimous. By 3 p.m., security was escorting Palmer from the building. As he passed my desk, he hissed, "You'll regret this. I still have friends in high places." I smiled calmly. "Actually, you don't." While we were meeting, federal agents were serving warrants to Judge Wilson and Commissioner Brandt based on evidence from my grandmother's journal. "Your friends are busy saving themselves." His face drained of color as he realized the full extent of my plan. This wasn't a hasty revenge scheme. It was the culmination of years of meticulous documentation, strategic alliance building, and patient waiting. "You don't understand what you've done," Palmer whispered, his voice breaking. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I corrected him. "I've reclaimed what was stolen. There's a difference." As security led him away, I returned to my desk, soon to be relocated to the executive floor. My phone buzzed with a message from Gregory. "Your grandmother would be proud." 6 months later, Laurent Harlow Investments was thriving under new leadership. The ethical legacy fund I'd created was outperforming market indices. Former employees who'd been pushed out under Palmer's regime were returning. And each morning, clients were greeted in the lobby by a new installation, a wall displaying our company history, featuring a prominent photograph of Miranda Laurent and Gregory Harlow before their original storefront. Gregory didn't live to see all these changes. He passed away 3 months after Palmer's removal, his testimony sealed and filed as he'd planned. At his memorial service, I placed a single rose on his casket, whispering, "Thank you for helping me finish what my grandmother started." Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, but restoration. Sometimes the most powerful response to humiliation isn't a shout, but a whisper that grows into an undeniable truth. And sometimes, the best way to defeat those who underestimate you is simply to wait until the perfect moment to show them exactly who you've been all along. If this story touched something in you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more powerful stories of justice and redemption to light. Have you ever witnessed someone reclaim what was rightfully theirs after years of patience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated, and the sweetest victory comes to those who wait for the perfect moment to reveal their true strength.